Let's get started. It's past 2 o'clock, and I would like to officially welcome you to this session on behalf of the Embassy of Denmark in Korea. My name is Jacob Rasmussen, and I work as the Energy Counsellor here at our embassy. Before we get started, I have a few service announcements for today. They are as the following. Please switch off your phone or put it on mute or vibrate. Simultaneously, translation are provided. If you want it in Korean, it's channel 1. If you want it in English, it's channel 2. If you want in Danish, you have to ask some of our Danish friends here today. I should also say that on the wall here, there are QR codes, so you can download all presentations afterwards if you want to digest further into the material. Now it gives me warm pleasure to welcome the first speaker today, Ms. Tilde Hellsten, Director from the Danish Energy Agency.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Tilde Hellsten, and I am Director at International Department within the Danish Energy Agency. It's an absolute pleasure to be back in Seoul and once again visit this hospital and very, very beautiful country. I had the pleasure to visit Korea for the first time in May, and I must say I was overwhelmed by the ambitions and the dedication I experienced when it comes to implementation of offshore wind and the green transition in general. I am therefore thrilled that the Danish Energy Agency is able to participate in this Green Business Week to continue the knowledge exchange and discussions related to offshore wind. We live in a world where climate changes are evident in every corner of the world and affect the everyday life of all people. The challenge of climate change requires us to work together with an ambitious, pragmatic, and scientific approach. This means, in very concrete terms, that we need to boost the deployment of renewable energy and especially offshore wind within an unprecedented speed. This entails that we put special effort in tackling the permitting bottlenecks while maintaining our environmental protection for the generations to come. Denmark has many years of experience within the green transition and how offshore wind can contribute to this. However, Denmark is also a small country representing only 0.1% of the global CO2 emissions. Thus, to accelerate the global green transition, we are eager to share our experiences, our do's, but also our don'ts within offshore wind energy, especially also highlighting the fact that the Danish experience have demonstrated that economic growth and green transitions are not opposed to one another. Denmark and Korea have a long history of cooperation in the area of energy. The partnership between the two countries is only getting stronger, joining efforts to promote a green transition with political, commercial, technological, and regulatory issues, hereby creating an ecosystem that serves the purpose of a paradigm shift towards a low-carbon growth. Denmark and Korea have had a cooperation specifically on renewable energy development since November of 2018. The cooperation is primarily centered around offshore wind, with a special focus on the regulatory frameworks. This cooperation is more specifically implemented in a partnership with our very good partner, Korea Energy Agency. A partnership which we highly value and look forward to continue for the years to come. Today's seminar focuses on sharing knowledge on the regulatory systems related to offshore wind in both Denmark and Korea, and how we can speed up the process of a successful development of more offshore wind. a highly relevant discussion in a world where international cooperation and knowledge sharing can help accelerate the global transition at a required speed and scale. Thank you very much for having us here in Korea. I look forward to the interesting presentation and a lively discussion with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tilde, for that excellent welcome remark, and I very much agree that we have a true partnership with Korea, and I hope we can grow that continuously over the coming years. Now we will step into the next session, which is presentations, and with me today I have a specialist from Denmark, Ms. Sine Madsen. She works at the Danish Energy Agency on the Korea program and is a specialist on local acceptance. She will walk us through the Danish offshore wind and policies. So Sine, you have 15 minutes. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here today and once again visit Korea and be able to participate in this session. My name is Sine Christiansen. I work for the Danish Energy Agency, and I have worked within the offshore wind sector for more than 15 years. I'm very delighted to be able to share the experience from Denmark on the development of offshore wind. I will focus my presentation on why we are doing it, where we are today, and the ambitions we have for the future. So Denmark is approximately half of the size of Korea, but with a lot less dense population. We have historically been very reliant on importing energy and fuels, but today our electricity generation mix consists of mainly renewables. To find the reason for this change in the energy mix, we need to go back to the 1970s. At that time, Denmark was one of the most oil-dependent countries of the OECD countries, and more than 99% of the energy supply came from imported fossil fuels, mainly oil. When the oil crisis hit Denmark in 1973, it caused a severe economic crisis with rising unemployment and implementation of car-free Sundays to save oil for electricity production and heating of houses. The oil crisis became the catalyst for the transformative diversification of the national energy mix and development of renewable energy alternatives to ensure that Denmark would never again end up in the same situation. As a result of the oil crisis, the Ministry of Trade published Denmark's first collective energy plan with the purpose of reducing Denmark's vulnerability towards energy imports, reducing the growth in energy consumption, and intensifying research and development within the energy sector. The goal was to increase Denmark's energy independence and develop stable renewable energy solutions. To reach this goal, several measures were put in place to reduce our energy consumption through energy savings, diversification of our energy supply, and increased support for energy research, which would result in the first commercial electricity-producing wind turbine. In a way, you can say that the last 50 years' energy policy have paved the way to the goals we have set out today and for the next 27 years. In 2020, the so-called Climate Act of Denmark set target to reduce Danish emissions by 70% in 2030 and reach climate neutrality by 2050. Last year, the Danish government followed up on the Climate Act with the goals presented at the bottom of the slide. Well, it's not really working, but basically the bottom of the slide shows you that among others, the goals of the climate neutrality was accelerated to be reached already in 2045 instead of 2050. Our long-term climate targets for 2030 and 2050 have broad political support in Parliament, which makes them resilient towards changes in government. To be able to reach the ambitious targets, electrification and integration of renewable energy plays a key role. The demand and consumption of energy over the last 20 years are illustrated here. We have substantially increased our energy supply from renewable energy sources, and at the same time, our efforts in energy efficiency has reduced our overall demand for energy. This has helped us pivot away from fossil fuels and forced us to adapt our system to the intermittent nature of renewables. Now, let me turn to our forecast for electricity production. Electrification is the cornerstone of our energy strategy going forward. This is our forecast for our electricity mix if we're going to achieve our climate targets. As you can see, mainly wind and solar will make up the vast majority of our electricity supply, and we've planned to phase out fossil fuels by mid-2030. So what do we have to do to reach this ambitious target? Electrify as much as possible is our core strategy. Continued penetration and flexibility are two keywords for us to achieve our goals, along with energy islands, interconnectors, direct electrification, which are our priorities. But we also need to mature our e-fuels such as hydrogen and ammonia. An analysis from IEA shows that Denmark has some of the lowest electricity prices among its member countries. And this is in a country where one of the highest percentages of variable renewables in the energy system. So clearly, our recipe seems to work as intended. In fact, more wind lowers electricity prices. And however counterintuitive it might seem, the more stable gas we use, the more the price rises. While the more intermittent wind we use, the more the price falls. From an economic perspective, it makes perfect sense. The marginal cost of wind is zero, and the balance cost is outweighed by the cost saved. And our wind industry has proven its worth throughout the years. The wind industry started as a hobby project in the late 70s. 2 decades later, we moved the wind turbines offshore in 1991, and we haven't looked back since. Today, Denmark produces 2.3 gigawatt from 15 different offshore wind farms and around 4.7 gigawatt from onshore wind farms. Current political agreement has a minimum of 9 gigawatt new offshore wind in the pipeline, and all to be in operation by 2030. Potentially even more will be developed, even more gigawatts, due to what we call free overplanting, which will be allowed for these coming 9 gigawatt of offshore wind. While more offshore wind farms have been erected, we have also seen a remarkable change in the cost of wind to the Danish state. For our Ministry of Finance, offshore wind was, until recently, a subsidies industry. On the chart here, you can see the subsidies that have been awarded for the different offshore projects over the last 13 years. From $156 per megawatt hour to 0.01 or nearly zero in the recent tender called Thor, that demonstrates the extreme progress the industry have made in terms of technology, maturity, and sophistication. So how have we managed to build this strong wind industry? Well, there are many reasons, but they can basically be divided into 4 categories. In Denmark, there is a strong political mandate based on broad agreement across parliament, across political parties, which help ensure a robust decision-making in the proceeding phases. Another key element is the one-stop shop concept. In this concept, the Danish Energy Agency, is a single point of contact for the developer of an offshore wind farm. This means that the permitting process is centralized within the Danish Energy Agency, while with the responsibility to coordinate with all other relevant authorities to grant the necessary permits. The one-stop shop helps ensure a clear, transparent, and smooth permitting process, and hereby reduces risks and uncertainties, which help create confidence for developers. The one-stop shop concept is therefore an important de-risking tool. Another important aspect of the one-stop shop concept is thorough planning for offshore wind sites. Maritime spatial planning and site selection is carefully undertaken to ensure development of the most cost-efficient sites first. When a site is put out for tender, an important part of this is dialogue with the industry to adjust tender conditions to the technical and financial realities. This market dialogue helps ensure a transparent procurement process, where all bidders have the same opportunity. And finally, certainty for a timely grid connection ensures a business case for the project. This increases the competition to the benefit of the socio-economic price. While we have our eyes set on the long-term targets, we are creating the short to mid-term markets. Currently, we are, as mentioned, planning to tender out 9 gigawatt of offshore wind projects, which is a clear pipeline that gives investors and businesses the confidence to invest and create jobs. As we are less than 7 years from first power from the 9 gigawatt projects, we need to work fast. It's important that we keep the good momentum and provide transparency and predictability in our planning, because the industry today and the industry globally need this more than ever to ensure that wind can remain a healthy industry and continue to drive the green transition. With this, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sine, for walking us through the story from Denmark, and not least the Danish one-stop shop, which I understand is also in progress here in Korea. The next speaker I would like to present is a Korean national that are actually immigrated and work and live in Denmark. He had his doctor degree at the Aalborg University, and now he's working for the Danish TSO Energinet. So it gives me great pleasure to present on the stage Dr. Jun Bum Kwon from Energinet. Thank you very much.
예, 야곱 소개 감사드립니다. 발표를 시작하기 전에 이제 제 소개를 간단히 먼저 드리면은 저는 덴마크에서 박사 후에 지금 에너기넷에서 8년.
Well, for the past 8 years, I've been working at Energinet, and what I am responsible for is the analysis of the Danish transmission system. And as a Korean person working in Denmark, it is my great pleasure and honor to be able to present at this seminar. The Energinet is a TSO, or transmission system operator, and I'm going to give a short introduction to what this company is doing and the kinds of projects that we are carrying out.
So
first, an introduction to the company. Energinet belongs to the Danish Ministry of Climate, Energy and Utilities, and we operate and develop the transmission grids and gas pipelines in Denmark. So we have the transmission operator function, where we own and operate the transmission grids in the country. And we also have the system operator function. So this is similar to KPX, or Korea Power Exchange. And we're also responsible for gas pipelines. So there is a separation between the ownership and the operation of the gas pipelines in Denmark. As was mentioned by the previous speaker, Denmark is a small country, but in Europe, Denmark is located between the European continent and the Nordic countries. And Denmark is a leader in expanding the renewable energy system. And just like many other European countries, Denmark is a leader in this area. So I'd like to share with you what we have been accumulating so far.
이제 보시는 발표 자료를 보시면
So if you look at this slide, you can see that Denmark has been working hard to pursue a flexible green transition. In the 1980s, as you can see here, we relied heavily on natural gas and oil, but there was a political determination and commitment to green transition. And under this political leadership, we were able to quickly move away from fossil fuels. Now, as of 2023, more than 60% of electricity come from renewable energy and 40% from bioenergy. And our goal is to produce 100% biomass and biogas. Compared to the situation in Korea, you may have this question as to how this has been possible. Because we need stable and comprehensive energy planning. And as a transmission system operator, we have the mandate and the responsibility to make all the important decisions. And also we need to utilize the grid connections and have a flexible electricity market. And the entire digital transition in the power sector has been critical in the success. Now, I would like to share with you some key indicators. When you look at the electricity generation, there's more than 10 gigawatt of solar, and our goal is to have 30 gigawatt capacity by 2030. And in Denmark, the green energy transition is not just about providing electricity to households, but also to make contributions to the transportation sector. As you can see in this graph, in the before 2020s, we had a different situation. So in the past, we mainly provided electricity or clean, green electricity to households, but now green electricity is used for building heatings as well as vehicles for transportation. And we provide green power to data centers, and power to X, or e-methane, is what we are contributing right now. Now, let me briefly talk about the hydrogen initiatives in Denmark. In order to reduce carbon emissions, we need not only to rely on electrification and producing green electricity, but also we need to find ways to decarbonize various sectors. And this is a key agenda for Denmark as well. As Energinet is an operator of gas pipelines, we are now pursuing a plan to build a hydrogen network. So we can produce hydrogen from offshore wind farms, and we can also get hydrogen from other sources and transmit hydrogen utilizing the pipeline network. And in Denmark, we are planning to use hydrogen for industries and also for transportation. And by 2030, more than 1 million tons of hydrogen generation is expected, and about 0.5 million tons of hydrogen demand is expected. So you can see an increasing demand for green electricity and green energy, and you may wonder how this can be met. Currently, many gigawatt and megawatt hour offshore wind farms are in operation. But furthermore, in order to meet the growing demand for green energy, there are various projects underway. Most of them are located in the North Sea. And I'm not sure if you can see the laser pointer, but this is Denmark, and this is North Sea. And this is surrounded by the UK, Norway, and Denmark. And more than 100 gigawatt of wind resources are available, so these will be developed in the future. So you can install offshore wind farms and generate electricity and transmit them to the demand markets. And these blue boxes represent potential sites, and the sites with red circles, these are projects that are actually underway. In the North Sea, there are many wind resources, but these can only be developed in collaboration with other countries because this is not something that Denmark can do alone. And currently, Denmark is working closely with other countries in this region. And the North Sea Hub is a project which is led by a consortium, and it's funded by the European Union. So we're participating in this initiative, and the Interopera consortium is also has been established.
그중에 덴마크에서
And now you can see the Energy Islands project in Denmark. I'd like to briefly talk about it. So we have a 3 to 5 gigawatt offshore wind is in plan. And as you can see here, this is located at the off of the west coast of Denmark. And with the policy decision of Denmark, there is a site near Copenhagen. So from that place to this offshore wind farm, the transmission grid will be established. And 3 gigawatt of offshore wind will be connected to German TSO. So now we're in the tendering process. And within 10 years, in the North Sea, we expect about 10 gigawatt of offshore wind. And from the energy islands, we're expecting 6 gigawatt of offshore wind energy. About 10 years ago, the situation was quite different, but now, in order to accelerate the expansion of offshore wind, we need to continue to find solutions to overcome the current challenges. Denmark also had its own issues in the early stages. There were many problems and challenges that faced Denmark, and so we had to continue to work hard to overcome them. And based on our experience, we now know that there should be a comprehensive grid plan. So a comprehensive grid planning and speedy decision-making process is necessary. And also various hybrid solutions are required, and OEM and developer and other dialogue with other neighboring countries and stakeholders are very critical to ensure success of these projects. I would like to thank you for your attention. And one last message that I want to share with you is that together with Denmark Energy Agency, Energinet is visiting Korea, and we are helping various countries around the world when it comes to renewable energy expansion. When they need some policy support or when they need to get experience or best practices, we are there to help them because we have a lot of experiences and we are committed to helping Korea in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jun, for this insights from Denmark, both on the current status, but also what is awaiting us in the future with hydrogen and energy islands. And I think this is one aspect where we can really collaborate together with Korea. At our embassy, we already have a Denmark-Korea Hydrogen Alliance, so I hope this can also contribute to further projects in the future. And we saw the many challenges that are still there in order to move ahead with the energy transition, and I noticed that a grid plan is very essential for this to be successful. And also I heard that Energinet is a growing company in Denmark because you're getting so much resources in-house. You're constructing a new facility. You have hired 600 people last year. So if there's any Koreans sitting in the audience with an engineering degree looking for an adventure, then maybe you can come and visit June afterwards and hear about life in Denmark and what that could be for you. Okay, let's move on to the next presenter today from Korea Energy Agency. It gives me great pleasure to present Sang-joon Kim, a good friend of Denmark and very essential element in the Korea-Denmark energy program that we have had over the last 5 years. Mr. Kim will present a status, the wind power status in Korea, and also key policies. So let's give him a warm hand. Thank you, Kim.
As have been introduced, I am Sang-joon Kim of the Korea Energy Agency. First, allow me to introduce the Korea Energy Agency. So from the very beginning of the wind farms, we are in the role of the approval process, and we are also playing the role of financing. And the pillar of renewable energy is RPS, and so we operate this vital RPS system. In terms of distribution, for example, if there's public-led development, or if there are local autonomy-led complexes, we will be leading in our role, and we are playing a large part in wind farms. And from that aspect, we have maintained the relations with the Embassy of Denmark in Korea for the last 5 years, in particular with Jacob and Tilde. We have known each other for quite a while now. As you have heard from the two presentations above, we do have a gap in the current status. In terms of technology and in practice, Denmark is quite leading, and their energy policies are also more advanced. So we tend to benchmark the Danish example, but we also see many limitations in Korea. For example, in Denmark, they started with a political consensus, but currently we don't have that in Korea. And then there could be resistance by the local community. There could be issues with the power systems. And there's also the issues of consultation with the Ministry of National Defense because of our relations with North Korea. And so all of these hinder the development of the wind farms in Korea. And so I do believe that it is a sort of a vicious cycle. And therefore, we do need to maintain great relations with Denmark into the future. We did start this year, but also next year. We look forward to the collaboration between Korean companies and advanced Danish companies to make inroads into other countries together. So we look forward to cooperative relations with Denmark and Danish companies. Today, I would like to talk about 4 different topics. First, the current status of wind farms in Korea. Second, the Korea wind power target. Third, the key policies. And fourth, the special act for wind power, which is currently being deliberated within the National Assembly. First, the current status. In order to do wind power, we need 4 different steps in Korea. So here you can see I have divided onshore with offshore. So it really means whether we have this in the mountains or on sea, and the approval process is a bit different, but it's quite similar all across the board. So for example, we have to license for wind condition measurement. Without that license, you cannot have electricity business license. So once you have the license for wind condition measurement, you have the electricity business license, and then you have the individual licensing. For example, if your wind farm is above 3 megawatt, then it's through the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy. If it's below 3 megawatts, it's from the local government. And you can see that for the individual license, you need the environmental impact assessment and the defense consultation. And the last step is the permission for construction by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy. Through this process, currently, we have reached a capacity of a total of 1.788 megawatt across 112 wind farms. We believe that it will be above 1.8 this year. So you can see that 1.6 is onshore and about 124.0 megawatts is offshore. So you can see that that's about 0.5% of the total power generation in Korea. And so we do need to boost the percentage. In order to do so, there are some wind farms under construction. First, the 100 megawatt in Jeju and the 96 megawatt in Shinan. So together there are about 200 megawatts. And if we take a look at the approved projects, there are projects that have been approved worth about 30 gigawatts. So for those that have received electricity business license, there is quite a large capacity, and we hope that we can provide support so that these projects are actually materialized. Let's take a look at the K-wind power industry. We have Tusan and Unison in the turbine market, and then we have small and medium-sized equipment companies. But despite so, we also have world-class companies in turbines and towers and also foundations. And we have a lot of exports concerning these parts. So overall, you can see that the technology and price competitiveness is relatively weaker. In particular, in terms of technology, it's weaker than American and European companies. For the towers and foundations, we do have the technology, but we are being challenged for price competitiveness by the Chinese companies. Here on the slide, we have an evaluation of Korean companies conducted last year concerning European companies, American companies, Korean and Chinese companies. So you can see that for turbines, we are a little bit weaker, but for towers or foundations, we have a strength in terms of technology. So, given the current situation, we have a plan to overcome the difficulties through the 10th Basic Plan of long-term electricity supply and demand. This plan actually announced the target of deploying 19.3 gigawatts by 2030, which is about 6.5% of all electricity generated. In order to achieve this goal, the government is leading various goals, but I have actually summarized them into 4 different goals. So first, we had complicated processes by different developers, and we wish to introduce a one-stop shop, which we benchmarked from Denmark. So in order to have a one-stop shop, it's difficult with the current status, and so various processes scattered across government agencies needs to come together into a single one-stop shop system. And so that is being discussed through the Wind Power Special Act being deliberated within the National Assembly. This year's National Assembly is about to close soon, and so we're not really sure if it will be passed. But even before the Special Act is passed, we do have a system called Integrated Farm. This is led by local autonomy. So for farms that are above 40 megawatts, incentives will be provided for integrated farms. So there will be an REC weight of a maximum 0.1, and all of the approvals will be conducted through the local governments from all of the relevant government agencies. In order to sign up for an integrated farm, there are some preconditions. First, you need to establish the private-public council. You need to listen to the local residents' opinions. You also need to have pre-consulting on environment and forest-related issues. All of these issues have to be solved before you sign up for an integrated farm. And when you sign up, there are 5 requirements that are deliberated. For example, are there appropriate renewable energy resources? Are we able to generate power? Is there appropriate infrastructure? What about the acceptance of the residents as well as the environmental factors, as well as the contribution to the local economy? So depending on these criteria, the final decision to whether you will become an integrated farm will be decided. And so coexistence with the residents is very important because the project has to be accepted by the residents. Up until now, the residents were not satisfied with the wind power farms in their local areas because they did not receive information in advance and they did not have a chance to express their opinions. And so this is the future policy direction for the government. So you can see that, for example, if there are profits with the wind farms, then it will be shared with the local community. And we will also have mandatory suitability analysis. And we will also facilitate engagement with stakeholders from the early stages. So that is the second direction. And we also have to talk about the cost.
Well, we need to be able to make sure that there is a low cost of electricity, because if the cost is high, then it will be transmitted to final consumers. So we need to find ways to reduce the cost of electricity. As was it seen in the case of Denmark, as they continue to generate more renewable energy, the cost of electricity will continue to go down. But that's not the case in Korea yet. So compared to 10 years ago, the entire cost of building an offshore wind farm continues to increase. Therefore, we need to find ways to reduce the levelized cost of electricity of offshore wind. And to do so, we need to increase the scale so that we can benefit from the economies of scale. And to do so, we can consider competitive bidding for fixed price contract, which means that the bid winner will have a contract with a 20-year fixed price, because this will provide predictability in terms of price. And this was introduced last year. And this year, there was the second bidding, and the bidders were all invited, and I believe that the final contract can be done within this year. So when we receive the bid applications, the government will review them, and so in the review process, the price will there are 60 points for the price and 40 points for other non-price related aspects, and then based on the evaluation, the winners will be announced. So when you look at this process for the bidding, you can see that the bidding announcement or the notice will be made, and then tender submissions will be done, and the Korea Energy Agency will evaluate the tender applications, and then the winners will be selected. And finally, the bid winners will sign this long-term contract for 20 years at a fixed price with RPS obligators. The fourth one is strengthening industrial competitiveness. The government, of course, has to continue to provide some protection and support for the wind industry. But if the industry cannot contribute in terms of job creation and economic growth, then this will be a problem. So we need to strengthen this industry's competitiveness. We are already a late mover in the offshore wind realm. but we are working really hard to promote our offshore wind industry. We still have to increase our industrial competitiveness. For instance, Tusan Enability produces turbines, but they're only in the scale of 8 megawatts, and they have not been commercialized yet. But when you look at the global companies, their contracts are based on 15 megawatts or even larger turbines are currently being provided. So there's a gap between domestic companies and overseas companies. So the government would like to support R&D in order to reduce these technological gaps. And the government is also planning to help establish the infrastructure, including the demonstration complexes and a center for O&M. And finally, we will continue to do benchmarking of overseas global leaders so that we can learn from their experiences. So these are some of the measures that the government is considering and will implement. But at the same time, we need a comprehensive framework. And to do so, the Special Act on the Promotion of Wind Power Deployment has been submitted to the National Assembly. And there are 4 major aspects of the background. First of all, the Wind Power Special Act draft was submitted because there has been some challenge in finding a suitable site. In the case of Denmark, when they look at the map of Denmark, they can identify potential sites for offshore wind. So we need to have a map system where we can identify potential sites for future developments. And secondly, we need to address local community acceptance, especially the fishing communities. So we need a special act to enhance public acceptance. And we have a very complex licensing process in Korea. And there are more than 30 provisions for licenses and permits related to offshore wind. So this is very complex right now. That is why we need a more simplified licensing process. And finally, we need a Wind Power Special Act to strengthen the supply chain. And for these reasons, the bill has been submitted to the National Assembly. When this becomes legislated, I believe that we can have a good foundation for offshore wind development. There are 3 major bills pending at the National Assembly. In May 2021, the Special Act on the Promotion of Wind Power Deployment was submitted. This is a comprehensive bill. And in February this year, 2 additional bills were submitted. And these are now being deliberated at the National Assembly altogether. And there were actually 8 meetings of deliberation at the National Assembly, and they're focusing more on offshore wind. When you look at these draft laws, there are 8 stages. The 3 bills have some differences, but they are all very much aligned in terms of their overarching objectives. So first of all, there is a content about MSP, marine spatial planning. As I said before, we need to have a comprehensive examination and analysis of the marine situations. We need information such as fisheries information and marine information to be able to determine potential sites. So in that sense, we need to have access to military and defense information, maritime traffic information, environment information, and fishing activities related information. And when we have this access, comprehensive access, then we can identify potential sites. So marine spatial planning will help us identify potential sites, and then preliminary zones will be designated. And there are many considerations to be made for that. We need to make sure that there's no major impact on our national defense or environment and fishing communities. So based on these considerations, preliminary zones will be designated. And then the Wind Power Development Committee will be able to carry out them. And based on these preliminary zone designations, basic plans will be designed. And names and locations, areas, layouts, and capacities of wind facilities, and so on. These will be included in the basic design plan, and they will need to be approved by the committee. And regarding these preliminary zones, there should be consultation with the private sector. and we need to get feedback and input from various stakeholders. And then when there's no major issue, then we can designate them as wind power districts, and they need to be approved by the committee. And then the government will select wind power developers for these wind power districts. And we will benchmark European procedures. So then the wind power developer will be selected, and we will have to consider LCOE and the financial conditions of the company and other aspects of the company. And then the final winner will be selected, and then the developer will establish the action plan. And in this action plan, it will deal with specific details on how compensation will be made for the fishers, as well as the implementation of various plans. As I mentioned, deliberations are underway at the National Assembly, but they have not been passed yet, and there are some obstacles. Of course, there are many obstacles, but in my view, I believe that these special acts need to be legislated so that we can have a firm foundation for the wind development, which will provide us with predictability and accountability. And in that sense, we believe that we need such a framework. And with that, I'd like to conclude my remarks. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sang-joon, for this very insightful presentation from KA, and also showing the challenges that still exist in this market, and also the reason why we need this international partnership to exchange best practice between countries. This concludes our panel session now, or presentation. Next is the panel session. We will have a 5-minute break, and then we will see us again here 3 o'clock for a panel discussion. Thank you so much. We're back. All right, please take your seats for the panel session that we're about to start at the Green Business Week 2023. On this panel today, I have with me attorney at law and special advisor from Danish Energy Agency, Mr. Bernardo Busel Niedmann, and I have from Korea Power Exchange, Mr. Hong-seok Choi, Director at Power System Innovation Department. And we have Secretary General Jae-min Lim from the Energy Transition Forum. And with us again, we have Kwon from Energinet, Senior Power System Engineer. What I would like today is to give the word to these gentlemen, and then they can reflect on the presentations that we had here today, and perhaps have a key message that the audience should take home after listening to these presentations from Korea and Denmark. So I would like to start with you, Bernardo. You have a few minutes, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jacob. First of all, I would like to thank all the different Korean stakeholders that we have met during this week. It has been a fantastic week in this mission led by our director from Global Cooperation Tilde Hellsten. It's been a remarkable, productive week. We've learned so much about the Korean energy system, but also about its ambitions and about its supply chain and about its culture. I'm one of the more than 100 government officials that work in the international department at the Danish Energy Agency, working towards this mission of sharing the experience of Denmark throughout the world, but also bringing back to Denmark the lessons of the different countries. During this week, we have learned a lot about how offshore wind can be implemented in a more effective way in Korea. We've learned about the challenges, and we've also been able to share the challenges that Denmark has had in the history regarding offshore wind. In order to facilitate a green transition as fast as possible, we have to learn to cooperate with each other. And in that regard, I'm gonna, borrow the words of our Director General. In terms of that, it's very, very important to share these experiences in regulatory matters. It's important at a technical level, etc. But we need to spend time together. We need to increase the level of international cooperation that we have. So first, I think the message that I would like to leave here in the table for the panel discussion is that we need to listen to each other radically. We need to, remember that we need to cooperate and listen to each other. And the second element that I think is very important is that one solution that has worked for Denmark is not necessarily the solution that is going to work for Korea. We need to be able to listen, but also to adapt the different solutions. And in this regard, I'm very, very happy to see the level of commitment of the government officials, of the different stakeholders in Korea towards the energy transition. So thank you very much for having us today, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Bernardo, for those reflections. And then we'll move on to Korea Power Exchange for Mr. Choi and his remarks.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am from the Korea Power Exchange, and I'm in charge of system innovation. Korea Power Exchange, as you are well aware, is in charge of the stable operation of the energy market and power system. So in other words, we operate the market, and we also design future markets. We also deal with the present and future energy sources, in particular the stable operation of such energy sources. We have heard very impressive presentations from Denmark. These are issues that I have had on my mind. Korea and Denmark have great similarities. In 2001, Korea moved away from the monopoly system of KEPCO to add competition, and currently the competition exists for the generation market. I believe that in 1999, Denmark went through a similar process with Korea. There was a monopoly before that, and they had fire-powered generation in the past. And at a similar time, competition was added for generation and distribution of energy. And in 2023, we can see that currently there is a big gap, although it was quite similar around the 2000. Denmark is a smaller market compared to Korea. The population is about 5 to 10 times the population in Korea compared to Denmark. And if we take a look at the peak capacity, Korea's peak demand is 13 times that of Denmark. So Korea is one of the largest market for power. I think we're one of the top 10 in the world, in fact. In terms of electricity, as you're well aware, compared to, we are not connected to other countries. We are a power island, in fact. Denmark is currently connected with 6 neighboring countries using either AC or DC. If we take a look at the percentage of renewables, Denmark is number 1 in the world. In Korea, thanks to the 9th and 10th basic plan, and currently 11th basic plan is in the pipeline, we can see that through these basic plans, the government does have the determination to enlarge the percentage of renewables in our energy mix. As I have already mentioned, although there are differences between Korea and Denmark, we do believe that there is a lot to cooperate on and learn from each other. I look forward to further discussions through questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Choi, for those remarks. Also pointing out the big differences that exist in the context when it comes to population size, which is reflected also in the energy demand. Now we have Jae-min Lim with us. So please, Jae-min, your opening statement.
Good afternoon. I am Jae-min Lim from the Energy Transition Korea. Well, there may be some of you who know our organization, but maybe you are unfamiliar with the organization. We actually gather companies, systems experts, economic experts, and environmental experts across the board to create the forum together to respond to climate change. So we need to transition our energy as a climate response. So we are looking for solutions for energy transition in Korea. Many civic groups participate in our forum. And so not only do we need energy transition, but we also have to think about the public good. So we have to talk to the fishing community, and we also have to listen to the resistance from the fishers. And Korea is different from Denmark. Denmark, the UK, France, Germany, the Netherlands, all of the countries surrounding the North Sea, their fishing output altogether is on par with Korea's single output. So that means that we have a high density of fishermen in Korea. And that is why acceptance by the local community is very important. So during the last few years, our forum has communicated with the fishing community. And the fishing community are now opening their hearts and thinking about accepting offshore wind farms as a way of energy transition. I'm quite privileged to be invited today because many people feel like they are in despair because of climate change. But the world is not going towards doom, but we are looking for partners to save ourselves. I do believe that Denmark would be a great partner to create that hope together. Denmark only takes up 0.1% of the global carbon dioxide emissions. Korea takes up 1%. So you can see Denmark does not emit a lot, but they continue to make an effort to reduce their emissions. When I visited Denmark, I had an opportunity to meet the Minister of Energy and Climate, and he mentioned it's just 0.1% in Denmark, but the experience that we have can be shared around the world and create solutions together, and together we can respond to climate change. That is the glimmer of hope. In Korea, not only should we have energy transition, but based on the experience and know-how that we accumulate in the process of energy transmission, we need to share that experience with countries around the world. I will go into questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Jae-min, for those kind words, and interesting to see that you have met our minister. We also hope to see our minister out here in Korea eventually. The last one, but not least, is Jun.
예, 안녕하세요. 예, 이번 패널
Thank you. I am Kwon Jun-bum. I already presented. So let me once again introduce Energinet to you. To establish renewable energy, there are 3 or 4 things that are needed. First, the market, the development of the power market. We need the infrastructure. We need government determination and decision-making. Energinet is in charge of infrastructure and also the power system. As other people have presented, well, thank you very much for those excellent presentations. As a Korean working in Denmark, as someone who is knowledgeable about the Korean situation as well, I think if we compare Korea to Denmark, there are many challenges. But nevertheless, as you have mentioned before, Denmark, although it's a small country, has a great direction that Denmark is setting for the world, and the Danish government is pursuing that ideal direction. For wind energy and renewables, Denmark did not achieve this overnight. Denmark did go through their share of trial and error, and in that process, the government, the developers, OEMs, TSO like Energinet and Energy Agency, all of these stakeholders worked together to solve issues one by one. That's what brought us to what Denmark is today. We will have new technologies in the future, and new technologies will be accompanied by its share of challenges. But we need to have a positive view of new technologies and find solutions where possible. With the Denmark Agency and Energinet and the Embassy of Denmark in Korea joined together to organize the visit to Korea this time around, and all of our experience, technical challenges, acceptance by the local community, these are all issues that Denmark went through. Of course, the experience from Denmark is not 100% translatable to the Korean situation, but I hope that this week will be a great start for the cooperation between Korea and Denmark. I look forward to further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jun. And as some of you know, this is the week where the Wind Power Act bill was actually being to be discussed in Parliament, and I understand it was not yet fully on the agenda, so it has not been passed yet. But who knows? We will get another chance for this bill to be passed. But as you know, in Denmark we've had the one-stop shop, as Sine explained before. So this is perhaps a question to you, Bernardo, on the one-stop shop, because I remember one of the last directors from Danish Energy Agency. He came out to Korea and he received the question, how did you do the one-stop shop? How did you do the practicality about it? And he told that, well, he was drinking a lot of coffee with the different organizers. But could you elaborate a bit more? What is the secret behind this one-stop shop? And is there any evidence behind it that it works? And was it also a process before it actually worked at the end?
Thank you for the question. So the one-stop shop as an institutional arrangement stems from the experience of Denmark in oil and gas. Interestingly enough, this is a part of what the oil and gas industry left us in Denmark. Not only pollution, but also the institutional arrangement that allows today to have a more simplified procedure to see the consenting process for offshore wind. What is interesting about the one-stop shop concept is that there is one entrance and one exit. Basically, there is a single point of contact between the state entities and the stakeholders. And that allows to have a clear view of who is where is the project in the consenting process. And we're very happy to see that in Korea there has been a will to simplify the process, because this is something that is happening throughout the world. We're seeing that we need to deploy renewable energy at a faster pace, but there is a bottleneck towards the permitting process. And the permitting process, of course, is a complex issue, because it doesn't only have to be fast, it has to be effective. We need to be able to control, we need to be able to assure that we're taking care of the environment in an appropriate way. But we have to do that effectively and efficiently. And there is literature that suggests that this type of arrangement is actually more efficient than have different agencies addressing the same kind of issues with overlappings of competences. In the Danish case, this has been successful. This doesn't mean that it's the perfect solution. It has to be adapted to the national context, to the legal reality, but definitely is in the Danish experience a good solution. And our Minister of Climate, Energy and Utilities has definitely said that we need to work fast enough to protect the environment, and of course the one-stop shop system can be one of those Lego pieces in this process.
Thank you, Bernardo. And as a follow-up question to that, I would like to ask Jun from Energinet. We also have a gentleman in the room from Energinet. How do you work with the one-stop shop? Do you see yourself as part of the one-stop shop? And what do you contribute to do the one-stop shop effectively in Denmark?
예, 질문 감사합니다.
Thank you very much for the question. As Bernardo mentioned, we have the one-stop shop, and from the perspective of the transmission system operator, Energinet is responsible for the technical aspect in the tendering process, and also in other processes if there are technical requirements to be examined. For instance, for power generators to be connected to the grids, there are some technical requirements that have to be met. And as was seen in the presentation by Sine, there are many new types of connection, overplanting and direct line. So it's not just about connecting to the existing grids, but also there are power to X and load addition. And these require new technical requirements. And for us, we are responsible for establishing and applying these new technical standards and requirements. And in this process, there may be some feedback and suggestions from the developers, and we're also responsible for addressing these concerns. May I ask a question? I would like to ask a question to Bernardo. You talked about the one-stop shop framework. As for Korea, we have local governments, the local autonomy system, and we have the central government. In the case of Denmark, the Danish Energy Agency is the main agency responsible for this. But in Korea, when you look at the content of these special acts, these bills, there are some disagreements as to who should be responsible for what, the roles and responsibilities. We have the Ministry of Maritime and Fisheries, so some say that that ministry has to be in charge, and others say that it has to be done by the Energy Ministry. Or some say that there are environmental aspects, and we have the Ministry of Environment. So my question is, In the case of Denmark, this one-stop shop, is it something that is mainly handled by the Energy Ministry at the central government level? Or what are the roles of the local governments? What do they do? And within the Energy Ministry, I wonder if you have any members from the Ministry of Environment or National Defense or other aspects. So how is it working?
I think that it's an excellent question. So the fact that the Danish Energy Agency is responsible for the three main licenses in the authorization for decommissioning doesn't give away the competence that each of the governmental agencies have within their substantive subject. The institutional arrangement of the one-stop shop, what makes is that the Danish Energy Agency coordinates with the different agencies, the different specialized agencies, for example, the Ministry of Culture, the Ministry of Business, for example, with the Ministry of Defense, etc. And they give the clearance before the Danish Energy Agency issues the respective licenses. But what is interesting about this arrangement is that who is negotiating basically how this is going to be given is between the Danish Energy Agency and that other governmental agency. It's not the stakeholder that has to go to the different ministries. But it's not that the Danish Energy Agency has to make, for example, a definition or an authorization regarding defense. That still remains in the desk of the Ministry of Defense in Denmark. It's just that we coordinate, behind the curtain, so it makes it easier for the developers just to communicate with one single entity. This also allows to avoid any, for example, contradictory decisions between government agencies, or, for example, an overlapping of competence. Basically, we have the responsibility to coordinate, these permits before, behind the curtain, and then go out, and talk to the developers. Regarding the local governments, for example, the role of municipalities, etc., there is specific roles that municipalities have in Denmark with regards to some specific permitting that is not covered by the one-stop shop. So the one-stop shop, in principle, covers the majority of the licensing process, but there's still some specific elements that has to be done at a local level. And this, of course, cannot be avoided because the interests and the specificities of these subjects are competence of those specific local governments or municipalities.
Thank you, Bernardo. Before we move on, I would like to hear from the audience. If there's any burning questions, then you can raise your hand and there will be a microphone coming to you. I think we have one question in the middle. Please address who you are and who the question is to.
네, 안녕하십니까. 저는 노스랜드.
Hello, I am Choi Jung-in from Northland Power Korea, and we are involved in developing wind power, offshore wind power in Korea. And I have a follow-up question to what Bernardo said. So the Danish Energy Agency is the one-stop shop window, and it is operating the bidding process and the licensing process. And I wonder, how much workforce do you have? How many people are involved in this? And if Korea creates this one-stop shop, then the Korea Energy Agency, I'm not sure if that agency will be doing something similar to what DEA is doing. I'm not sure if you can provide an answer, or maybe Mr. Kim Sang-joon from Korea Energy Agency can address this. So I wonder how we can create a team or workforce that can handle this.
I can respond on the Danish side. Currently, we are 1,000 professionals in the Danish Energy Agency. We have a strong team regarding the tendering procedures and licensing procedures, but we also rely on a very strong network of consultants. Denmark has a tradition of working with consultants that are specialized in the offshore wind industry, in the different parts of the life cycle of offshore wind. So it is common to see that the Danish Energy Agency, for example, works very closely with Energinet and also consultants that are specialized, for example, in environmental aspects or technical aspects regarding the specifications that is going to be needed for the technical issues regarding offshore wind. Usually there is a team appointed for the different projects that are going to be tendered. And there's project managers that take the project from A to Z. And we usually work with the Danish state lawyers as well in the development of the tender and in the evaluation of the tender. And we usually consult also with other governmental agencies if there is, for example, tax implications, etc., that are related to this. So as much as we are a single window of point of contact, we do have to consult with other governmental agencies and stakeholders to refine the process. And that's why also it takes about 7 to 10 years to develop the entire process. So conceptually, it's just very important to understand that this is not the responsibility of a single company or a single governmental agency. It takes a system, an ecosystem that is very well coordinated. And I think what we're seeing today in Korea is looking very good. We're seeing a lot of political will, technical capacity, and an ecosystem. And I'm sure that in the years to come, we're going to see very good news regarding offshore wind.
Thank you, Bernardo. Let's take one more question from the audience. On my right side in the front. Yeah, let's go to Korea Energy Agency first and have them address.
네, 에너지공단 김상.
Thank you. I actually would like to answer the question that had come up earlier. Well, in Korea, how are we going to create a one-stop shop? I think there was a question concerning that. Well, as we don't have a law yet, it's very difficult to talk about the organizational aspect. But if we take a look at the draft of the act that is being deliberated, we have the Prime Minister as the head of the Wind Generation Committee, and then we also have a body that goes under the Prime Minister. So the Wind Power Committee will have all of the ministers, and the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy will create the lower organizational composition. We believe that the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of National Defense, Ministry of Economy, other agencies related to marine environment, the Energy Agency, and other agencies will become a part of this organization. So many public organizations that are stakeholders of wind energy will become a part of this organization to enable a one-stop shop. But we don't have the details yet, as we are still waiting for the law to be passed by the National Assembly. Well, as long as I have the microphone, may I ask a question?
예.
Well, a month ago, the European Commission announced the support measures for renewables. I think it was called the Wind Energy Package, perhaps. So this actually includes various policy measures. So because this package was announced, what will change within the European wind power market? I believe that support is included in this package. So what will change within Europe? And if Korean companies were to participate in the wind energy market as developers or as suppliers, what would be considerations that Korean companies should make in relation to the recently announced package? This question goes to Bernardo.
Bernardo, please, and also colleagues from DEA if you want to support something on that.
Thank you very much. The recent package announced by the European Union is a response basically to a contingency regarding the energy crisis that we have seen very recently because of the illegal invasion from Russia to Ukraine. And also because we're seeing that we're getting off target for our, climate commitments. So it's very, very important that we deploy renewable energy very fast. We are seeing support measures for sure, but we're also seeing a new package of measures regarding a new consenting process because we need these projects to be constructed very, very fast. How that is going to be implemented, we have to see still because a lot of the European regulation has to be enacted in domestic regulation after it has been approved at a European level. But we are seeing that all companies that are able to participate, for example, in Danish tenders, would have access to benefits in this regard because we're going to see new favorable conditions for the deployment of these projects. So I see that we in a moment of stress of offshore wind, of the supply chain, etc., these news at a very high regulation level come as a relief. And I think it's very, very important that we need to de-stress the supply chains. We need to make the projects happen. And in that regard, I think the Danish government is very much listening to what the developers are saying.
I think time is up. But Sine and Tilde, did you have any reflections on that last point? No. I think the very last word goes to Jae-min. Jae-min, you raised your hand before, so please go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. What I like to say is related to the previous question. Recently, I met with a company that is producing the installation vessel, and the Korea's plan is to have 13 gigawatt by 2030 or 40, and that company said it's not going to be easy because the vessels that are needed for installation of offshore wind are lacking. So there's a shortage of such vessels because these are employed in Europe, and we may not have enough vessels. But we need 13 gigawatts. Otherwise, we cannot reach our NDC target. So it's not just the site selection, but also the licensing process. But also we need to work hard to establish the infrastructure and the supply chain. And to do so, the government has to provide a clear timeline as to by when we need what. There should be a very strong commitment and determination from the government. Otherwise, we cannot prepare the port facilities, we cannot prepare the vessels and so on. So we need more visibility. And in Europe, I wonder how much of a bottleneck there is in the supply chain for offshore wind. And I wonder if you will have any issues in reaching out and achieving your goals. So that's my question. And I do have another question, but due to time constraint, that is my question.
Your question was to DEA, I assume.
I think it's very clear that there is, the offshore wind market is a world market. So we see that there is a global stress with regards to the supply chain. And I think there's a lot of people, very intelligent people, that are putting a lot of effort and energy to try to solve this dilemma. But there's an additional component, if the storm was not perfect enough, is that we're going to see in Europe for the first time in these couple of years, the first phases of decommissioning as well. And so we are going to need vessels, not only for the installation of new offshore wind farms, but also for the decommissioning and repowering and refurbishing of the existing wind farms. And so this is something that we need to take into consideration also when we're analyzing what is going to happen in the next 30 years in the development. And we need to plan today what is going to happen with decommissioning in terms of the guarantees that are structured in the tendering process, and also for the planning, because we need to, let know the ship makers, and the companies that are providing the services that these vessels are going to be needed. We need to let know the insurance companies that are associated to this, all the services that are surrounded by this industry need to be prepared for this process. And we need to make sure that this happens timely.
Thank you, Bernardo. And okay, I think Jun will have the very, very last word, and then we will finish.
I would like to just add on.
I would like to add just one more point. Energinet, when we go past the licensing and tender, everything comes to Energinet, and we are working with the farms itself. And we believe that the supply chain issue is quite severe. From the TOS perspective, whether it be KEPCO or KPS, I think you need to prepare together with the government stakeholders. Because when there are delays in the supply chain, how are you going to revise the plans? Or when there are changes because of the supply chain, what kind of changes should be made? You need to have a holistic approach. And so we always work on trying to move at the same pace. And furthermore, if I may name an example, if there is a large-scale wind energy, then there could be vulnerabilities in the power system or uncertainties and instabilities in the frequency or the voltage. That's why the holistic approach is very important. For example, the TSOs in Europe or Australia, where they're quite advanced in terms of renewable energy, they have already experienced challenges in logistics and supply chains. And that is why cables and lines or condensers or synchronizers, these are some of these systems that they pre-order. And so that's why pre-orders are important, to make sure that they secure their components. And so that is why we need a holistic approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Jun. And this concludes our session today. So thank you very much to all the panel debate and also to the presenters and not least the audience for coming here today. I think the conclusion is that we need another conference, another panel debate, because there are so many issues to tackle on this topic of the energy transition in Korea. So stay tuned with the Embassy of Denmark in Korea. I'm sure we will have future events where you have the opportunities to come and join. So thank you very much. Thank you.